Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to April 6th. Hopefully, everyone's doing fine this morning. I'm doing pretty good, feeling all right. Sun is shining again. We have Tuesday mornings are looking good. How is everyone doing this morning? Everyone awake? Everyone feeling good? Guys are feeling good. That's good. We're listening. We're trying to get our schoolwork done. Is awesome. Everyone's responding. That's great. Good to see. Good to hear. We are in week 11 of 13, so we have a few weeks left of school. A few big weeks. But how is everyone doing with their workload? Is it just about right now, or is it too heavy? Is everyone managing? How are things going with everything? Okay. I know I always kind of feel it. Everyone kind of feels it, I think, during the end of the semester. Thanks, Andrew. Guess this is just over your second semester that you've done online. I'm guessing most of you are graduating. I think I've mentioned that before, but what sort of, does anyone have any, I don't know if you can call it summer employment anymore. I guess if you're coming back to school in the fall, you can call it summer employment, but has anyone lined up any jobs? Is anyone going to be working after school is completed? Going on with your life after school? Give me any indication of what's going on and got some employment. I don't think you do a co-op. Right, Sirkin? Do you have a job already? Do you have will work after the semester. So anyone else have any other things going on? At a marina. Okay. It's good to know. Which is it a marina? Ashley, you're from Barrie, I think. Is it a marina in the area or do you go away to work at a marina? Anyone else have position they're going to this summer? Looking forward to a summer in Honey Harbor. Oh, I know the Honey Harbor Marina very well. My son worked at Kitchie for many years, 4 or 5 years, and I made many trips up to Honey Harbor, dropping him off at the marina, Andy's Cove. Okay, well, I would visit the Honey Harbor. I guess it's the main marina there. Um, I think it's called Honey Harbor Marina, but called Brandy's Cove. Good. Hey, well, it is a popular spot for boats, that's for sure. Uh, Fun to work in that sort of location. See lots of people heading out for vacations and enjoy the water. Just beautiful on Georgian Bay. It's good. Good. I'm hoping everyone is doing well in their courses as well. I know I've been monitoring the progress in this program and your quizzes, and it seems like most of either that are online here have been doing pretty well. Um, uh, Checking that out. There's a few people that are a little bit behind, but as far as completing modules and quizzes, we do try to get them done weekly when we're in class, and just so you don't fall too far behind. But uh, if you have missed any that you want to complete or you want to redo any quizzes, and I will put out an announcement about this. We will have till the last Friday of the last week. So April 23rd will be the last day, April 23rd at, we're going to say at 11:59 p.m. EST, Eastern Standard Time, to complete any modules or redo any quizzes, that sort of thing, only because I need to have marks in, I think on the 28th. So I need a few days to organize everything and make sure in order and to tabulate everything. Okay. So if there's any modules, challenge phases, any quizzes that you want to do or haven't done, April 23rd will be the final date to do those. Okay. So if there's are any that you want to redo, I've received some messages from people to, I guess, reset them and give you another crack at them. So some are a little bit more difficult than others. Some are easier. The last week was the easier one, but this week's sort of the same. I would say that I think the quiz is probably more difficult than the challenge phase. Shouldn't say that too soon, because this phase is difficult or something. Although I have done them, I always do them ahead of time to make sure. I've done them a few times in the past as well. What I'd like to find out from you, just because we're nearing the end of the semester, is any suggestions that you might have for this program moving forward. Personally, I kind of feel that it is lacking in the interaction and discussion of the topics. I know I sometimes discuss them on my own here while everyone listens, but I would like to have more interaction with the course. And last year, there was a huge change in the delivery of the course. So last year was the first year we used the modules, and it was quite new and interesting. This year, we are using the modules again. We did have presentations last year. Obviously, we're doing them this year too. But I think the one thing I'm finding that's lacking is that interaction of the discussion on the topics. So, for instance, what I'm thinking about, but I know I'd like to hear back from you, and maybe you can put it in the chat, or you can, just unmute yourself and comment, is to have a weekly reading. I know we have the concept overview, which is a reading, but it's mostly give you information to be successful in the quiz and in the module. But let's say this week is women in sport, and if we had one article to read and to either have an online submissions for discussion or discussion in class, that would be included weekly. So it'd be the quiz, the challenge phase, which you do in class, and then there would be also either an online discussion or a in-class discussion. Any comments or any thoughts about that, about adding that to the class? It is adding, and it has nothing to do with you in this class in this semester, but this is just for the following year. So I'm not going to be adding anything onto your plate. I'm just thinking about students in the future to make the content more enriching and more valuable. And we like it if it's an in-person class. Yeah. I don't know, have any of you, so we'll keep that thought going, just about if you like that idea of adding a weekly article, and it wouldn't, or a weekly paper, something not too long, something that gives us a bit more relevance, maybe a research paper on different topics. Could be an article that's interesting from a different periodicals or magazines. Andrew, you're right. It is harder to encourage discussion over WebEx calls. But we could, if it was online, I don't think it's going to be online, but if it was online, or even if it's in person, we could have it an online discussion with posting your comments. I don't know how people feel about that. Have any of your classes had online discussion boards that you've had to do weekly posts? So put up one original post and then respond to other people's posts. Is that something that is interesting, or do you just find it not that interesting to do that? It does give you the opportunity to provide feedback, provide your opinions on an article that's posted. It could be done as a discussion board in Blackboard. Any thoughts on that, or sounds interesting? Okay, thanks Brad for responding. A couple of, I see that, okay, and you like them. Ashlyn, okay, you like that. I think it might just give students more of an opportunity to get involved in the topics. I know it's pretty easy to sit back and not do any interaction in class and just complete the work that needs to be done. The students that are doing the presentations each week are the ones that are sort of on stage that week. It would be good to have a discussion after the presentation, so the presentation takes place. Students have read the article, then a discussion takes place in class. It might be a little bit easier. It's online. You can definitely set up a discussion board. So anyone not like that, just, the volume of work, would it be too much? Because outside this meeting each week, there's not a lot of other work. You do have to prep by reading the concept overview. Is definitely helpful to read and get that ahead of time so you can prepare yourself for the weekly quizzes. But to have an article as well might be, I think, add a bit more to this class. So at least that's what I'm leaning towards. All right. Well, thanks for providing me with some feedback. For the few of you that responded, thank you. All right. And what are we doing today? We have, there it is. All right. So we are talking about ethics in sports. And what we are going to address, we'll have that concept overview, which I will go over. Have some discussion questions, so maybe some people will be able to speak up and provide some comments. We'll have the quiz, the learning phase, and the challenge phase. And the final 2 weeks of class will be a little bit different. This is the last module that has a quiz. So there are no more quizzes after this week. So the sports franchise and there's two more, actual name of them. Hold on a second. The GM for the sports franchise and the advanced sports franchise. So there's two sports franchises where the last two modules, all of the modules you have worked on up to this point are put all together in one learning phase and one challenge phase. So there's a lot of moving parts, which I have mentioned in the past, these last few. So we will meet in class. Next week, there's the last presentation. So we'll have the concept overview, and I'll review the last two modules. We'll have the presentation, and we will go through the learning phase together, and then I'll let you do the challenge phase on your own. And then the final week is very similar, but sorry, as far as the modules, very similar. We'll meet in class. The last class will be optional if you want to attend that or not, but I will be in class and give you that help with the advanced sports franchise module. Right, so next week will be the last presentation, and everyone will be able to attend that and give the concept overview, the briefing of the concept overview for the sports franchise, and then the final week, the advanced sports franchise, no presentation. You don't have to attend, but I will give another overview of that module and help you with any difficulties you're having, because they are difficult, that's for sure. Okay. Questions about that? Not seeing any at this point. Okay, so today the presentation will take place after the quiz, after 9:05, because I know one of the presenters is not able to be here because they have an appointment this morning, so they are going to be here after 9:05. So that's when presentation will take place sometime after that point. And let's say we get started with the concept overview. So if you could find it in Blackboard, pull it up. If I can just find it here on my screen so I can share it. There you go. Is okay, and I will share it now. Chat is open. Okay. All right. So ethics in sports. So first of all, has there been a specific class just on ethics in sports you have taken in the last few years? I wonder if there's an ethics in sports. Give me a yes or a no. There's been an ethics in sports class that you've had to take. Don't think so. Okay. I wasn't sure if that happened. I thought maybe there has been one, but maybe it's not here anymore. Well, ethics in sports is definitely, I find, an interesting topic, a good one that you can debate whenever you talk about ethics. It definitely brings up a lot of controversial topics and good topics to discuss. So it's definitely a balancing act, and there's no sort of black and white answers for a lot of these situations, but depending on what your ethics and your morals are, you'll see lots of different examples that we'll get into regarding athletes and sports franchises and that sort of thing, and the different decisions they have to make based on what a player has done, mostly off the field, off the ice, off the court, and that sort of thing. So does their outside the sport happenings, interactions, controversies have a problem or affect what they do on the court, on the field, on the rink? So we will find out. So an owner of a sports team faces difficult decisions that affect not only the commercial brand of the organization, but the individuals that work for that organization. So in an ideal world, decisions are made with considering the economic outcomes, the moral and ethical principles, and the legal ramifications associated with each option. In sports, an organization is judged mainly on wins and losses and the ability to generate revenue. But there are many other things that are taking place with players as far as their behavior outside of the game. So when owning a team, not that any of us will ever own a team, but we'd be working for teams in the future, possibly. That could be one of your goals, to work for a pro team or a sport team. Board of directors, so it needs to act in the best interest of its shareholders. So that's for a public organization or a public corporation. Private organization, like a professional team, I think there's only a handful of public sports, pro sports teams. And I just think this was in the news a few weeks ago. Maybe there might be one that comes to mind, one hockey one. Maybe somebody might know this. I can't remember the name of the team offhand, but I think there's one public sports organization that I heard of. But anyways, let's go on to, because most of them are private. They don't have shareholders, but it does have invested individuals. So who are the stakeholders in this? So we have the fans, the players, sponsors, and staff. And there's intense scrutiny from the media as well that will affect how the organization as a whole will be viewed in the public eye. Okay, so organization culture and values. So structure of values. So successful organizations create a structure of values that are instilled into all personnel to make up the organizational wide culture. So values are defined as the operating philosophies or principles that guide an organization's internal conduct as well as its relationships with fans, sponsors, and media. So these values come from the leadership group. Okay, so the values come from the top down, from the leadership group, previous successful decision-maker procedures on or from a purpose of achieving the goals within the organization. So values provide the principle and ethical foundation to which the organizational decisions are made. So the values, okay, organizational culture values. So when we are looking at ethics, it's defined as the objective basis on which judgments are made regarding right and wrong. So objective basis, so it is objective. Okay, so they're not black and white. There is a lot of gray in this. These decisions are made regarding right and wrong. Instead of being motivated by what decisions will be made or make the organization more or less money, motivations are based on what is responsible and morally right or wrong. The concept of right and wrong is extremely abstract. Okay, so we are looking at extremely abstract. But philosophers have broken it down into 4 schools. So we have 4 schools of this ethic. So virtue, duty, consequential, and relative. Now, all 4 of these are asked on the quiz. So there is different. They'll either give you the definition and ask you which one it is, or give you a list. And there's definitely, they're asking about all 4 of these on the quiz. Okay. And we'll just touch on each of these. But how many times, if we're just thinking about ethics, that this decision, how many athletes that you hear about that have had problems off or outside the game, and the team is okay with it or they're not okay with it? Like we're going to talk about a few of the examples where players have just gone a little bit too far. One of the ones in the NHL that comes to my mind is Sean Avery, that he probably could have been a pretty good hockey player, but he just pushed it a bit too far in hockey with was he on the Rangers, I believe, and he was just causing too many problems and too much bad attention, bad publicity for the team that he was playing for. So eventually they never renewed his contract. I don't remember the full story with Sean Avery, but he was definitely someone in the media that was always drawing bad attention towards the franchise. That is one example. And I think I have in here this one for you. I'm just getting the, just copy this for you. I'll just put this in the chat. Find out where we are. Okay, I'm sharing this. Okay, the chat's down here. Let's go to this article. Oops. There we go. It just takes me a few minutes to figure all that out, and I will share this. Stop sharing that. A different one. All right, so 15 off-ice incidents the NHL doesn't want you to know about. Okay, so they definitely like to hide these sort of things. Why does the NHL want to hide or not want us to know about these sort of things? Right? You have to ask why they're doing this. Why do people think that the NHL doesn't? I just found this article in the NHL. Could have been the NFL, could be MLB or whatever. But we're looking at, Dustin drunken boat ride. So, this is something the NHL wants you to know about this. Possibly not. Let's see what else we have here. Some that we might remember. Here's an old. I remember Ed Belfour. Leaf Foley leads to arrest. Do we ever know that Jared Stoll was arrested for possession of drugs? We know that. This is a more popular one that you may have heard about. In 2016, what year is it? Summer of 2009, Patrick Kane beats up a cab driver. Just that sort of thing that happens not always the best thing. Patrick Roy arrested for domestic violence. Who else do we have here that we may have heard of? But, there's sometimes people get a little drunk or drunk and drive vehicles. So there's all sorts of different things that you may not have heard about, but are definitely there in the news that have happened. Players doing not good things, and the team, and the NHL trying to keep it quiet. Okay, let's go. I'll go back to the set overview. So as we're looking at these 4 different types of ethics that we've broken it down. So virtue, okay, sorry. Where are we here? Sorry, virtue approach. So focuses on the character of the person acting. So it states that one should act to develop virtuous qualities: honesty, fairness, kindness, faithfulness, generosity, prudence, integrity, and so on. Duty ethics states that there is a conduct that is plainly wrong and that the rule or principles in place, whether that the governing laws, codes, conduct, or company rules, should be followed regardless of what the outcome may be. The consequential ethics states the opposite, whereby if an outcome was good, then the process by which that outcome occurred were also good, regardless of the motivations. Finally, the relative ethics states that the ethical conduct is relative to the norms of one's culture. Therefore, one's conduct may be right in one culture or wrong in another. There are no set ethical standards. Conduct is subjective. Each of these 4 broad categories contains varieties of approaches to ethics, some of which share characteristics across categories. So relative ethics, could anyone think of some conduct that is okay in one culture but not in another culture? Don't have any example that they could think of that might be something? It doesn't have to do with sports, but what do you think might be a ethical conduct that is okay in one culture but not in another culture? And you could think about laws. So are there different laws in different societies? Well, I'll give you one. Drinking, sure, drinking could be one. You know, it's particularly if you're, Ashley, if you're thinking of sort of the European culture compared to drinking in the North American culture into drinking. So we know that the rules in the European countries are a little bit less strict than the North American culture. So that could be one. What I was thinking is like capital punishment. So every country has a different idea on capital punishment. You know, is there a death sentence? Is there rehabilitation? You know, what are the outlook on that sort of thing? So if you think about different laws, laws on drinking, laws on capital punishment, and so on. So there's different ways, different ideas here that relative ethics, you can think of examples that way. So each of these, okay, we mentioned that. Okay, whoops. Ethical decision making approaches. So there's not a perfect theory for making ethical decisions, but different approaches can be applied or referenced based on the facts of the dilemma and the parties involved. So the decision makers should take the theories from above and the following approaches into account when trying to make a decision on an organizational dilemma. Okay, so what we are looking at now is ethical decision-making approaches. So these are different approaches. Okay, so the utilitarian approach. And these will be asked on the quiz as well. A utilitarian approach, this approach states that a decision is ethical if it provides the most good or the least harm for all who are affected, employees and so on, athletes. If it is focused on the consequences of the decision and balances the good accomplished with the harm done in accomplishing that good. Okay, so the fairness approach. This approach states that a decision is ethical if it treats all individuals involved equally or fairly. So again, the word fair, okay? The common good approach. This approach states that the decision is ethical if it is made to benefit the whole over a collective use. So the common good. So it's common good. So it's benefiting the whole over a few. Okay, so that's this approach. So this approach, the virtue approach, this approach focuses on an individual reaching their highest potential of character, virtue, ethics, as if I do this, what kind of person will I become? Okay, so they ask that sort of question there. Okay, and there we have an example here of Maria Sharapova, tennis player, women's tennis player, that is suspended from international tennis for testing positive for a banned substance. Okay, so she's tested positive for a banned substance. She was sponsored by both Nike and a Tag Heuer, which is a watch company, and both companies dropped her because of her suspension. So, as a hypothetical, assume Sharapova won her appeal and is completely free of any wrongdoing. Next, assume Sharapova won her appeal on a technicality that she did not receive timely notice but still tested positive. For each assumption, would these sponsors, should they re-engage her? So if she was banned for testing positive. She appealed, and she actually didn't test positive. She wasn't positive. What do you think the companies would do? What do you think? Do you think they should re-engage her, restart, sign another contract, or continue with her contract or sponsorship? You know, what would these companies want to do? Would they just say, "Oh, sorry, the harm is already done. We don't want any part of it. We want to keep a clean image," or, "Oh, we'll forgive her. She wasn't convicted. She wasn't using any banned substances, and we're going to take her back on." So what do you think these two companies would do from an ethical viewpoint? Should these companies re-engage her, even if it is bad business decision? So, what should they do? I'm thinking, the companies are probably not going to take her back on, just because sort of the harm has already been done. She's already been charged, or she's already been, suspended. There has been some suspicion of her using bad substances, and why have that person on as you're representing your company if there's lots of others out there that don't have any of these problems? So these economic decisions and cost benefit considerations. So cost benefit analysis. So there are a few questions, I think 1 or 2 questions on the quiz about cost benefit analysis, and they will ask about, does the cost outweigh the benefit for certain situations? So it could say that, okay, by signing this player, you're going to lose this amount of money, but you actually are going to gain this because you're going to win games. So you have to make that calculated decision. As we move back up to the top here in this page, and there's another example here. Tampa Bay Buccaneers had the #1 overall selection in the 2015 NFL draft. It had decision choosing between 2 quality quarterbacks. So there was Winston and Mariota, and Winston had significant off-field incidents, including theft and sexual assault, where Mariota had no off-field incidents, but played an offensive that could easily translate into the NFL. What did the Buccaneers do? They decide to draft Winston based on his ability to lead. So they actually, at this point, didn't care about his theft and sexual assault incidences. They said, "Oh, he's a better player. We're going to take him or draft him," which in turn would this. They're just looking at thinking that the player, the team, the fans wouldn't care if that happened, and they're looking at the more revenue generated from greater public exposure and increased sponsorship and season ticket in lieu of the off-field incidents that could harm the credibility or culture of the Buccaneers organization if those incidents carried over into the NFL. So they really didn't care. They just went with them. Okay. Not only, so legal considerations, not only must an owner consider ethical or ethical or business effects of a decision, but also must think about the legal ramifications of the organization and the stakeholders. The legal consideration focuses on assessing and limiting risk to the organization. So does acting in a certain way create greater likelihood the organization or its employees will be part of a lawsuit, or does it cause greater risk to the fan and athlete safety or sponsorship brand value? So, for example, 2016 Rio, many of you may have watched the Rio Olympics, and remember that I still see this picture of the athletes doing I think it was a triathlon, or the swimmers, because they swim in the open water. There was the garbage and empty bottles and just who knows what was floating in the water, and they were, really concerned about the health concerns of an athlete competing in the swimming competitions, going through the Olympics. So I don't know if anyone remembers that, but you know, would was it ethically right thing to be, because of the conditions may have harmed? What if people got sick? Were they, should they have suspended these competitions? What should they have done to make this, do the right thing? So ethically, they had to make a decision, for their safety. Failure to provide a safe work environment, not work environment, but competition environment. Okay, so we have a few definitions that we've already talked about: the cost benefit analysis, the ethics, organizational culture, values, stakeholders, and we gone through all those. All right, so we are looking at 8:42 currently, and I will go to the here, the module, and open up the quiz. The quiz has been made available for ethics and sports. You should have access to the quiz right now. It's 8:42. What I will say is, we will come back at, let's come back at 9 o'clock, right? Actually, we'll make it 9:05, right? So give you that much time because it'll give you a bit of a break too. So I'll say the quiz 2:05. And when we come back, I have a few questions I want to discuss about ethics, and then we'll get into, depending on when the group is ready to present, we'll go with the presentation when we get back after just get organized. Or if the group needs a bit more time, we can get into the discussion and the learning phase. Okay, so we'll figure it out at 9:05, but it is 8:43 right now. Go till 9:05, so I'm just going to put myself mute, but I will be back in a few minutes. So I should stop sharing this. Sharing. Okay, we will talk in a few minutes. All right, it's almost 9:05. It's 9:04. We are going to get going, and I am going to just ask a few questions here to see if you guys think. So we pretty well answered the questions through the quiz. But what about the ethical decisions of sports being played during the pandemic? Does anyone have any opinion on, should pro sports be taking place during the pandemic? You feel that, is there too many risks for the players? Is it all about the money? Do the owners, are they looking just to make their money, the players to make their money? What sort of, what if there, we have seen in different sports that there has been postponed games because of different outbreaks of COVID taking place. Now, is this safe for the players? Is it the right thing to do? Opinions on this? Is everyone here that watches sports still watching sports
I
regardless
think
of.
a big part of it is money, but also it gives everybody an outlet still. If the teams are,
Sure, it is. I think it is about the money. What about the lack of, it is a lot different, but what if they start letting fans back in the game? Like the NFL did have some fans at the game. Have been some other sports that have allowed fans back to the stadiums in different volumes. Is this another sort of ethical decision that the leagues need to make? You were you were the one running the sports franchise, sports league. If you were the commissioner of the MLB, what would your decision be? And just and starting to let fans back, then is it also, are you opening up the concession stands, and you're opening up, you have to have your ushers and security, and all those people also have to be, could be threats or risks for those people that are coming back to the stadiums. I feel like they were doing a pretty good, decent job so far. Having fans at minimal capacity seems to be the best option for the time being. Thanks, Andrew. That does sound like a good option. What about, I'm not sure the answer on this one, the people, the golf tournaments that are taking place, are they allowing fans at the golf? I know the Masters starts this week. Big golf tournament, well, probably one of the biggest of the four majors for the men's golf. Are the Masters is the Masters allowing fans at that tournament? Does anyone know that? Maybe limited number. Okay, we're not sure. Okay. All right, so we're talking about, that ethical decision of fans being back at the game. I've been watching, I'd have to say I've been watching hockey. That's the sport I watch the most often. And they do pump the crowd sounds over the broadcast. I don't know if it's happening in the arenas for the players, but watching the game on TV is fairly close to what a game was like without fans. It does seem, it must be different for the players though, without having fans cheering. And how do they do celebrate goals, but there's definitely not a lot of jumping into the glass that you've seen in the past. Let's try to celebrate with the fans and that sort of thing, but definitely a decision that needs to be made with these sports franchises and sports leagues. I think minimal attendance is good. If it's 10% or 20% or whatever that percentage is they come up with to make it appropriate and safe for everyone. And looking back now at the players with off-field problems. So, the teams need to sign only players that don't have any off-field problems, or is it okay for teams to sign players that have off-field problems? Maybe they have a drug addiction, or they have been charged for the DUIs, or what else? Domestic violence or assault. What is the ethical responsibility of the franchises, their fans, and for their sponsors? Is it okay and ethically okay for them to sign players that have had off-field problems? What is the limit? What Any opinions? Does anyone have any opinions on these sports teams? And, is it all about winning and doesn't matter who the player is? Do the fans really care or not? I have a feeling that the fans do care and that the sponsors do care. And I know we see examples of that happening. But what we're going to do is I will open up the learning phase, the challenge phase. Okay. And Jesse, I'm guessing Jessica's not here yet. Is that correct?
Jessica's not coming. I think Khalid's coming, but he was just saying he didn't even know it was today. So we'll see when he comes on.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead with the learning phase, and we can target for 9:30 or so. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So on the learning phase of the ethics and sports management, we have 12 steps to go with. And in the learning phase, you'll make decisions for a practice franchise named the Pumas. Okay, you can see right down here. Okay, the Pumas team stadium is shown on the screen like normally. And the team is doing poorly with no wins and 2 losses. They have an important player personnel decision to make. They need a better quarterback. However, the best available free agents all have some off-field issues. Okay. So what we're going to do is what we've been doing here. Actions, player management, and you can select quarterback. We've done this just like last week. The simplified performance table shows salary. Okay, we know salary is right here. Right. Okay, and then the pass. We take this. Just click on the top. We know pass completion percentage. Higher is better, and then interceptions. Lower is better. Okay, we know that these 2 quarterbacks are throwing lots of interceptions is not good. Okay. You can click on any column header. Okay, look at the available players. Based on the statistics, how would you rank the players? Based on these 3 things, we would have to say that Paxton Thorson is probably the best at this one. So they're number 1. Myers is number 2, and Price is number 3. Okay, based on the low interceptions and high percentage pass completion. Next. Okay, now let's see what else is going on with these players. So on this phase, you have to click on this article right here. The Sporting News magazine has recently published an article on all 3. Read them by clicking this. So we click on this and it pops up. The Sporting News. So there's 3 people in trouble. And we can see here that you have to kind of read through this. So Price, a large group of friends and fans, rival team began taunting him. Witnesses say the fight ensued, which Price knocked the person to the ground. It is unclear exactly who started the physical altercation. No charges, no charges have been filed at this time. So he got in a scuffle, knocked someone down, but no charges. Thorson is a standout quarterback, best one out of the 3. Convicted of a domestic assault. The conviction stems from an incident in the hotel last fall when he struck his girlfriend while he waited outside the cocktail lounge. Incident was caught on video. Lawyers for Thorson were appealing. He will not be sentenced until the appeals have been heard. The league has yet to make any disciplinary actions. Okay, so this guy is been charged for domestic dispute or domestic assault, caught on camera. And then there's Myers, been arrested for DUI, drinking under the influence of prescription drugs. His car was seen leaving, stopped by the police. He admitted to taking prescription painkillers. He was in possession of a valid prescription, and charges have not been laid yet. So he was driving. He had taken some drugs with a valid prescription. Captain Ed Gonzalez confirmed that driving under the influence of prescribed drugs is illegal and charges may be forthcoming. So the captain of the police. Okay, so which statements best summarize the player's issues? Thorson, domestic abuse. Myers driving while impaired, and this one here. Well, that wasn't with the armed robbery. Okay, next. Your decision to sign one or more players is up to you. The decision, you will need to consider the ethical perspectives of your fans, your organization, and yourself. In an ideal world, the fans' ethical standards, your organizational ethical standards, and your personal ethical standards might be in a line. However, in reality, it is more often not the case, and ethical decisions become very complex. Ethical norms are influenced by society and culture. In this case simulation, you'll use the fan base as a gauge of ethical norms in this society. Okay, so the fan base. So that what's going to happen is our fan base is going to provide comments during our simulations. Okay. Since this is the learning phase, let's experiment by signing Paxton. Let's sign this guy. Okay, he is the top performing perspective on the field but with serious off-field issues, which we did read about, right? He is his girlfriend in the hotel bar or in the lobby hotel. Okay, so we're going to close that. So we are going to go down to Paxton and we're going to sign that player and hit close. And then we're going to do run to and September 26th. So the games are always on Sunday. We're going to go to the 26th and run this. And the question is, did your team, the Pumas, win or lose? And we know, right, looking at the top is always where up here is where it shows what's happening. So we won 31-0. Yeah, 31-0. We won. Next. That was a nice win in simulation. In this simulation, the more you win, the more fans come to your games. But other factors influence attendance as well. Look at attendance and the fans' comments about the game on the event report. Right over here. Customers' comments, fans' comments. In this case, actually, look under the ticket sales and find the total number of tickets sold. Ticket sales, right here, 4785. Ticket sales for the game before were around 11,000. Did your sales go up or down? Pretty clear they went down, way down. Okay, next. Now take a look at the customer comments section. This is what customer comments right over here. And what has happened here? The number of fans making each type of comment is showing a type. What is the most common reason fans stayed away from your game? Can't believe they have Paxton Thornton on this team. I'm not giving them any of my money. 6,666. That's a lot of, I would say that's a very high amount. Okay, disgust with this fella. Not the weather, not the ticket prices. Okay, next. In this case, societal ethical norms make having Paxton Thornton on your team a strong negative, despite his ability to help your team win. In reality, this would be one factor that weighed into your decision. You would also consider the ethical standards of your organization, impact on player teammates. Of course, not all of the off-field transgressions are as bad as Thorson, mainly fall into a gray area. Let's try one more sign and close the event report. Okay, let's close this up. And what do they want us to do? Okay, we go actions, player management. Click the box next to Paxton, and we're going to release him. He is bad news. Release him. But we're going to go down here and get Reg, the next best player. No problems with Reg. We're going to sign him. Okay, now you run the simulation through 1 week, which includes a home game on Sunday. Click. We'll close this first. We're going to go run 2. It's going to be October 3rd. Click here. Click October 3rd. And away we go. See what happens. Look at the title bar of a rent report in the window that pops up. The title bar. And they talk about the title bar right there. You're won, but it was a lot closer game, that's for sure. 17-13. Okay, win's a win, right? That's close, but it's still a win. Let's look at the attendance and fan comments about the game. All right, so we know that tickets. Look at our total tickets, 12,738. That's a lot of tickets. Can't believe they have Reg Myers on the team. I'm not giving away. We only had 429 comments about Reg. So that's a reasonable amount of negative comments for one person. But we know that the sales did go up. Next. Ticket sales have rebounded with Paxton gone. Now take a look at the customer comments section on the event report. Customer comments, which we just did. Fans complaining about Reg Myers being on the team. Yes, it's about the same number. No. Yes, but fewer than 500. Correct. So in this case, the Saddle Fan Society are willing to look past Myers' issues of driving after taking the painkillers. Your organization or you personally might still have issues with the behavior, but it won't affect ticket sales. For the purpose of the challenge phase, you can assume that the ethical standards of the society convictions worse than allegations. So convictions are worse. So convictions are worse than allegations, right? So people can put up with allegations, but the convictions aren't that great. Congratulations, we've finished that. We'll close this. I'm going to open up the challenge phase for a moment just to show you what needs to be done. Basically, back. Okay, I've already done it a few times, so go back here for a second. And we see that the general manager of the Wildcats, and if you do nothing, they'll likely finish with 0-8 record and attendance falling below 30%. But what you have to do is some things, and you need to get 93,000 fans at the next 6 games or greater. Okay, so you have 6 games, you know about 16,000. How does that work out? I didn't divide that. So 93,000 divided by 6 equals just over 15,500 at each game. So you probably will take your 2 chances to get close to 93,000. What you need to do is actions, player management, and you have your quarterback and your linebacker. So you have to adjust those players to be successful in your simulations. Okay. All right. Now we are getting close to 9:25. And Jesse, how you doing? Are you feeling okay? Ready to get going, or what?
Yeah, I'm good. He's in
Good.
class now, so.
Okay. All right. So 9:25. I will turn it over to you. Do you remember when you do share your screen? If you when you go to share, there is a drop-down menu that you should choose optimize for motion and video, and then there will be a little checkbox that says share your computer audio. And I will turn it over to you. Okay, Jesse?
Yeah, it was just downloading something.
No problem.
All right, 1 second.
Sorry.
Okay. Everybody can see it. Yes, no? Okay, thanks, Andrew. Okay, so today Khalid and I will be talking about women in sport. Jess isn't here today, she has an appointment. So I'll just get started with that. View here is we're talking about the progression of women's sport from the late 1800s to present day and where issues still arise. And we'll go through the timeline of women's sport, the past, present, and future, branding and sponsorship, and then the pay gap. Okay, so from the 1800s to 1900s, this is just the overview here. Prior to the late 1800s, women had access to sport through informal, ruleless recreational activities, so there was no competition involved until 1896. Sorry, there was the first intercollegiate basketball game that was played between Cal and Stanford, but then 3 years later in 1899, both schools banned women from intercollegiate play. And in 1900, women competed in the Olympics for the first time. There was a big gap for key aspects in women's sports. So here we have in 1972, Title IX was passed. So what Title IX is equal funding and opportunity for athletes within education. So this gave women the opportunity in universities and colleges to have teams. So this was a huge thing. As you can see in the picture, there's people supporting this being passed, so obviously girls have opportunities as well. In 1974, Billie Jean King created Women's Sports Foundation. And then in 1984, women were allowed to compete in the Olympic marathon, so they made a whole women's Olympic marathon. In 1991, the first Women's World Cup was held in China. And also in 1991, all Olympic events held had to have a women's event for that sport as well. So say there was, I don't know, volleyball for men, then there's now always a women's side of it as well. So these are just the logos. This one logo with the blue is for the World Cup, and then the Women's Sports Foundation. Here in 1992 to 2000, in 1995, USA Basketball created a year-long training program for the U.S. Women's Olympic Team, which was huge because they didn't have a professional women's league at all yet. So having a training program just for a U.S. Women's Team was a big deal. Then the year later, soccer, softball, and hockey were added to the Olympics. Obviously, soccer and softball were in the summer section, and then the following Winter Olympics hockey was included for women. That same year, the ABL and the WNBA were formed, and in 1999, the Women's World Cup became the most successful women's sporting event in history. Does anybody have any guesses to how many television viewers there were in the 1999 World Cup? You can just, oh, I guess, can I even see comments though? Or you can just unmute yourself.
I could guess.
Okay.
How about, is it like for the whole World Cup, like all the games? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I believe so.
20 million.
20? It's pretty close. It's 18. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
big for Women's World Cup. And then in 2000, the Women's United Soccer Association is formed. So that was the WUSA, which is the label here. So then further on, 2001 to 2015. So in 2010, Angela James was the first woman to be inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, which is insane. That's a great thing. And then in 2012, the Olympic Games in London. Every country included female athletes in delegation. So does anybody have a guess for how many female athletes were competing in the 2012 Olympic Games?
Okay, somebody's has to have a guess, right, Jesse? Somebody must be able to.
Andrew said 900. No, it's actually quite a bit considering every country included female athletes. So, typically in the Olympic Games, there's around 10,000 athletes, give or take. And at the 2012 Olympics, there's different sources, but it ranges from like top 4,600 to just over 4,800 athletes that were female. So at this point, there's just over 5,000 in the last games that are female athletes. So that's like from 45 to 50% of the Olympic Games are female athletes now, which is really good. And then also in 2012, the NWSL was created. So that's the National Women's Soccer League. And that was created because previously the WUSA that I just talked about in the slide was like it shut down. And then in 2015, the Women's World Cup final USA versus Japan became the most watched soccer game in America history with 25.4 million views. Okay, and then 2016 to 2021, it should say. These are just like key stats, mostly just for individual athletes, female athletes. So in 2017, Serena Williams won her 23rd Grand Slam title, making her the holder of the most Grand Slam titles of any male or female. In 2019, Bianca Andreescu won the US Open against Serena Williams at the age of 19. So that just displays that once the women or female athletes are given the opportunity and funding, they can do amazing things at such a young age. Winning the US Open and getting your first Grand Slam at 19 is pretty incredible. In 2020, Christine Sinclair broke the record for the most career international goals for any male or female at 185 goals. I think she's now at 186. And in 2021, National Girls and Women in Sports Day reached 35 years. So National Girls and Women in Sport Day is every February 3rd. So that's pretty neat that we have our own day. And now we're going into the past in sports. So in 1894, Sadie Miller became the first female baseball reporter. But because of the stigma around women at the time, Miller had to hide her identity by using an alias. She used her initials SKM to sign her articles. It was not until almost 100 years later that women would be recognized as sport reporters and allowed access to locker rooms. In 1977, a sports reporter for the New York Yankees named Melissa Ledke sued the Baseball Commission for violating her 14th Amendment rights for denying her access to the clubhouse during the World Series in 1977. In 1978, she won her case, opening up a new career for all women to pursue. This is pretty cool because we're going to go into the present day and the future, but most of us were at the sport conference in our first year, and there was reporters there that we got to meet up with, so it just shows what that did for us. Our current sports situation, with the rise of female athletes, the Canadian Soccer Association reported that 31% of all new players registered in 1996 were in fact female athletes. Next, Kevin Pipe, Executive Director of the Canadian Soccer Association, explains, "These are not girls in carefully coordinated outfits. We have women covered in mud who have played their butts off for 90 minutes. Another example is in hockey. When the Women's World Championship held in Kitchener, Ontario was happening, it truly showed off the professionalism in the players and team, how highly skilled they were, and just how quick they can be. The Summer Olympics were also seen as a high point for women's sports. This was shown through high television ratings, attendance at the Olympic venues in sports such as basketball, soccer, and softball. And lastly, for our current sports situation, based off the past to the present, women's sport have come a long way. Women can participate in any sport, become reporters, coaches, referees, announcers, and pave the way for potential female icons. Next, for the future in sport, women's professional sports do not always have the same equal support as men's professional sports do in categories such as getting paid, sponsor support, and television exposure, which we will lead into after this slide as we get into the pay gap. However, some television markets report that there are equal ratings for some men and women's sports. If we continue to support both genders in every sport, the industry will grow and things like pay gaps will no longer separate or hold back athletes. Borowski explains there are more people who get the chance to see women's sports, the more they like them. And the more women's sports is watched or spoken about, the more it will inspire other young female athletes to pursue careers in sports. Next is sponsorship and branding in sports within the media. So the media needs to step in and take action to support women's sports to better encourage sponsors to invest. There are female sports women out there, but there's lack of representation. This can cause a huge impact for young females who see a lack of women being represented in the media, having a lack of role models to look up to, not being able to hear their stories or feel a connection to these athletes can and will put a pause on the growth for female athletes. To go off of that, it is very true. When you look at, I feel the individual athletes, such as tennis players, it's easier to see them in the media as it's like a one-on-one sport, whereas if you're doing, say, swimming or even soccer, it's just the key events, like the Women's World Cup, is when you get to see your role models on television or in the media. Even though women's sports continues to perform, it only attracts 1% of the sponsorship market. And according to research conducted by Nielsen, 4% of online coverage goes to the women's only sport, and less than 20% of all television sport covers women's only mixed sport. Between 2013 and 2017, the women's sponsorship deal increased by 47%, which is insane. And the overall problem with the sponsorships in women's sports is not that they cannot perform in the market, but it's the brand's attitudes towards sponsoring female teams. Okay, yeah. And next we have the gender pay gap. So you can go ahead. Just let me know when you need me to switch.
Okay. So it's difficult to calculate how gender norms have contributed to the gender pay gap in sports over time, but men have enjoyed hundreds of more years to build interest in and place men's sports into mainstream culture. It's not just that female artists are underpaid, it's that women have spent most of history not permitted or encouraged to play sports. The gender pay gap has been widely publicized in recent years, with discrepancies between pay for men and women found in companies across the globe. There are inconsistencies in most areas, but sport is the one which has really hit the headlines. The average American woman earns 1% of what an average American man earns, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And this stark disparity has hardly budged for more than a decade. The pay gap between men and women has sat at 80% to 83% since 2004. The gap varies by industry according to pay scale. So the legal profession has the worst discrepancy at 64%, while arts, entertainment, and sports comes in well above average at 94%. While this is heartening for advocates of equal pay, there is still progress that needs to be made, especially when it comes to professional sports. Whether professional players receive salaries or individual prize money from competitions, male athletes in basketball, golf, soccer, baseball, and tennis make anywhere from 15% to nearly 100% more than female artists. Women in sports have come a long way since Dave Dickerson, Zaharias, and Billie Jean King, yet the financial distance between today's female pros and their male counterparts whose earnings have soared higher is probably larger than ever. What accounts are this? Sex discrimination, inexorable market forces, or some combination of the two? Can you go next? What is the gender pay gap in sports? The gender pay gap is prevalent in all areas of public life, including sports. Even though a large number of sports do as tennis and athletics and reward men and women equal prize money, many female athletes are still not earning as much as their male counterparts are earning. Football, actually soccer, is retaining the biggest pay gap. Norway's Football Association recently decided to correct the financial discrepancy on the national teams, in part by redistributing a share of the men's side marketing deal. On Forbes' annual list of the world's 100 highest paid athletes, there's only one woman, tennis legend Serena Williams' total earnings of salaries and bonuses put her total income at 27 million, making her the 51 best paid athlete of 2017. Tennis set the precedent in equal pay when the US Open distributed the same amount of prize money for men and women in 1973. There's no exact metric for the gender pay in sports overall, as it differs greatly depending on the sport and the level at which athletes are competing within each sport. Every year, Forbes publishes a list of the top 100 paid athletes in the world. For the first time in 8 years, a female artist did not make the list, which gives a pretty good snapshot of how male athletes dominate the biggest salaries. The ATF and the WTA in tennis and the NBA and WNBA in basketball offer two different instances of pay inequality in sports with regards to prize money and payouts of total revenue. After the Women's World Cup summer of 2019, soccer was under the spotlight. The winning team received prize money of 3.2 million euros, although double the prize money of the previous tournament was still almost 10 times less than the men's prize money of 29 million. It is often argued that the huge difference in award is down to increased revenue from the larger audience that men's sports have. However, the men's and women's World Cup rights are generally sold as a package. How does the pay gap prevail itself in sports? Using the soccer analogy once more, a 2017 report found that 88% of players in the Women's Super League in England earn less than 18,000 a year. To put this into perspective, the average player in the Men's Premier League approximately earns 50,000 a week. Why does this matter? Well, the same report found that 90% of players were considering cutting short their careers in order to find a higher paying job or start a family. This hinders the growth of sports, and the lack of investment in and support of female players has wide-reaching consequences for the current and next generation of soccer players. This situation is mirrored across the sporting arena with a few exceptions, leading to a dearth of talent. Tennis has had equal prize money across the board for men and women for several years now, boosted and encouraged by some high-profile female players. In fact, the US Open has had equal prizes since 1973. Many more sports are following this example, but the highest profile ones, such as soccer and cricket, are lagging behind. It would be easy to carve the pay gap in tennis down to men's tournaments, generating more revenue, but there is not a uniform international scale for prize money across minor and major tournaments. For instance, at the 2015 China Open, the men's champion earned 67% of what the women's championship earned. But at a tournament in Rio de Janeiro, 5 months later, the female champion earned 14% of the male's winner's payout. Even when women are paid fairly in tennis, a larger question remains: what system should be adopted to ensure men and women are paid fairly consistently, no matter what the level or location of the tournament is? Next. I'm going to be talking about professional sports salary comparison between male versus female. Each league and sports organization has its own structure of compensation and benefits, but while the level of pay varies from sport to sport, a look at 5 popular American sports shows a common reality. Female athletes consistently make less than men. As you can see, basketball in the NBA and between the NBA and WNBA, men earn 8 million. 328 million. They make much more than the women, as you can see in the table. Oh, this is, I think it went further.
This one?
Yeah, it's this one. Yeah, as you can see in the table, they make much more. You can see the difference. Okay, now we can go next.
We're back.
Basketball is often used as one of the worst examples of pay inequality in professional sports. Set the stage: last year's first pick in the WNBA draft earned a salary of $52,564 for her rookie season. DeAndre Ayton, her NBA counterpart, earned $5 million for his rookie season. For its older stars, the WNBA has a max salary of cap of $117K, whereas some of the NBA's best players earn close to 300 times more. In short, the WNBA's best veterans are making a fraction of what the NBA's worst players are making. Here are the projected minimum and maximum salary figures for full-time players in 2019, 2020. Yeah, the salary cap in NBA is to 26 million, while in the WNBA it's 50K, and the minimum salary for a rookie is 242,000, while in the NBA, in the WNBA it's 15K. Kind of huge difference. Yeah. Pay gap in soccer. The MLS played their first game in 1996 after the United States hosted the FIFA World Cup in 1994. The National Women's Soccer League played their first game in 2013. That's following the end of the Women's Professional Soccer League the previous year. Both teams have a salary cap, meaning each team has a limit on how much they can pay their players and some limits on how they can divide that pot of money. Yeah, so the MLS in 2013 had a minimum of 46K and a maximum of 600K. The team salary budget was 3 million, almost 3 million, while in 2020 it increased, everything increased. But for the women's, there's a huge gap in the salaries. Go next. How does the pay gap in sports usually justified? It's justified as that sports were not designed for women. People say that most sports actually were never designed for women. They were designed to fit the physical abilities of men. Ancient Greece introduced formal sport with the first Olympic in 776 BC that included sports such as human and chariot races, wrestling, jumping, disc and javelin throwing, and more. Now, men on average are by nature often stronger and taller. They use that as an excuse. Another justification is that sports is there's a less of a market for female sports. Building on the first problem, in most sports there's a less of a market for the women's side of the game. If you look at TV coverage, interest, ticket sales, and other market indicators, most men's sports will outperform women's sports. On average and across sports, that's a statistical fact. The market argument is the most readily used argument by male players and tournament directors when it comes to not rewarding women gender equal pay. And can you go next? How does the media disparity contribute to the sports pay gap? If you click through sports coverage on television, listen to radio or podcast, or read news online, you probably notice that vast majority of our media is dedicated to men's sport, and there is no law forcing outlets to give equal coverage. Television is often cited the main culprit. A 2015 study found that over 118 hours of sports news broadcast programming from ESPN's SportsCenter and Fox Sports 1's Fox Sports Live, women's sports were featured less than 1% of the time. But coverage of women's sports is not just sparse, it may also be boring. Another decades-long study found that while media on women's sports is no longer obviously sexist, it still tends to be dull and obligatory, without the jokes and compliments used to frame segments on men's sports. Of course, this creates a vicious cycle. If coverage of women's sports is boring, that those interested in women's sports may be less inclined to read or watch content, and the outlet will continue to believe that there is no interest. In this way, an imbalance in media coverage has also contributed to the gender pay gap in sports. How can we get gender equal pay to work? The gender pay in sports presents a unique set of variables impacting compensation, and hopefully sheds light on how we can work towards creating a fair environment for athletes. In any profession, employers should ask how they can ensure men and women are paid equitably to the best of their ability. To really get gender equal pay, pure meritocracy needs to be revoked, and arguments need to come from a sociological, ideological POV. Furthermore, women should celebrate the female competition as their own version of the sport that is similar, yet also different to the men's. Women's tennis is one of the sports that was most successful in breaking the glass ceiling for the women's side. At the four biggest tournaments, the Grand Slams, which are the Australian Open, Wimbledon, French Open, and the US Open, women and men are rewarded equal prize money since 2007. They did four things to accomplish this significant reduction of the gender pay. They connect to the broader sociological discourse. They revoke peer meritocracy by taking away platforms to be directly compared to men. Market women's tennis as being the same sport but a different category. They all, last but not least, they establish and support female role models, the heroes of the sport that become the face of women's tennis and continue to push for more gender equality. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're just gonna go into a quick little video. It's a Nike ad.
If we show emotion, called dramatic. If we want to play against men, we're nuts. And if we dream of equal opportunity, delusional. When we stand for something, we're unhinged.
It's Super, it's gonna need to calm down.
When we're too good, there's something wrong with us. And if we get angry, we're hysterical, or rational, or just being crazy. But a woman running a marathon was crazy.
Officials tried to pull her off the course.
A woman boxing was crazy. A woman dunking? Crazy. Coaching an NBA team? Crazy. A woman competing in a hit job, changing her sport, landing a double cork 1080, or winning 23 Grand Slams, having a baby, and then coming back for more? Crazy, 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 and crazy. So if they want to call you crazy, fine. Show them what crazy can do.
Okay, and so to conclude, women's sport has come a long way over the past 100+ years. However, it is evident that there are many issues in regard to equality in sport, whether it is the pay gap or opportunities provided to female athletes. Now that's a reference. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions, any comments that anyone has that they'd like to ask Jesse or Khaled? Questions coming through? Well, maybe I'll ask a question because I always try to have some conversation. And it's interesting that sports is definitely a replication of what happens in our real world. I guess when I say real world, with people that have jobs and with gender equity and equal pay, equal work. Now, there is a law in Ontario that is Bill 148 that describes equal pay for equal work. So if a woman's doing the same job as a man, then they should be paid the same. And why do you think this hasn't? I know you talked about it in your presentation, but what do you think the biggest issues are that's taking sports so long to catch up to, or women in sports to catch up to men in sports making the same amount of money? It's if it's the law in Ontario to if someone has the same job as I do in my position, in the position I have, they have to make the same amount. And it's just not happening in sports. Do
I think
that?
right now it's like the opportunities given at a young age. Like, yeah, we have opportunities in Canada for girls in sport when you're super young, like as soon as you're able to walk, really. But in other countries, they don't have the same opportunities. And they're not, and it's like broadcasting and media. People don't want to put the money into it unless they know the outcome of it. So with soccer from women, although they're like the US and Canada teams are like rivals and they do amazing and the World Cup like gets a ton of views, they still don't have the funding for their professional sports because no one covers it. Like you can watch Saturday, Sunday mornings like English Premier League, and that's all of like England's sports soccer teams, like, and it's all day, but there's no like viewing like that for NWSL and stuff like that. So if it's not going to be promoted online or streamed or on television, there's no way for people really to get into it unless you live directly there. Because yeah, we have TSC here, but you go to those games and even those games aren't as streamed or like watched like publicly, whatever. But we don't have that opportunity for them to be filmed to get promoted to people. Like I know my dad used to watch like EPL every weekend and that would be on the television. We don't live in England, but we're always watching it. So if we don't have those opportunities and that media coverage, there's no way people from around the world are going to get it hyped up. And the opportunities may not be given to those people until it is hyped up here, if that makes sense.
Now, I noticed one of the biggest one of the bigger sports that just took place or events was or is taking place is March Madness. And there is a men's division and there's a women's division. And it's just interesting. I saw some comparisons on what the men get compared to what the women get. And, as far as right down to the training facilities where the women are given maybe a treadmill and a few dumbbells, and the men have a full fitness center with all the equipment they need. Just there's a lot of inequality at many different levels. One thing we are seeing though is that in the jobs is that in sports casting, I know you mentioned the one about the woman that was tried to get access to the locker room, and the rules have changed on that now because there are many more sportscasters that are female, and we are seeing those on the mainstream TV with the Sportsnet or and TSN that we see a lot of females broadcasting. But you still haven't seen women make the jump into the head sports of the assistant head coaches of sports. It's like it seems to be okay for men to coach women, but not for women to coach men.
There's been a few coaches that have been getting in like the last like I guess year, I would say, or a couple years that are getting into like coaching big teams that are men's teams, and but like the coverage of that is, yeah, it's great because it's so like surprising to them that like that could even be possible. But that's true. Every like soccer team for the most part is coached by men, like every team in general. But like even when you're younger and you're not professional, like most coaches are men regardless of your sport. And so maybe that's why, because everybody's used to it from day one, that it's not going to be a female coaching you if you're in house league or if you're professional.
Well, yeah, there certainly are lots of changes that need to take place in the future, and hopefully, people like yourself, Jesse, will make those changes. Okay. I will put in the chat the peer evaluation form for yourself and Kelly to fill out. And thank you very much for that presentation. Very informative. Lots of interesting facts. And interesting information. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you want me to send that page to Jess as well?
Thank you.
Yeah, you can send a link to her.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so that'll be it for this week. If there's no other questions or comments about the presentation or about the modules, I will stay on the line until everyone's off the line. But at this point, I'll just stop the recording and finish the class. So thanks very much for attending this week. We'll see you next week for the last presentation and to go over the sports franchise module, which is a pretty intense module. It takes a lot longer than these ones, which these modules can be done in 10 or 15 minutes sometimes. The other ones do take a lot longer because it's all the modules wrapped up together. Okay, so I'll stop the recording now and I'll stay on the line. Everyone's gone. But thanks for this week. We'll see you next week.